This was the scene 6 weeks ago after the explosion at the Obelisk Reservoir. 8 teenage girls were injured and the roof of the underground reservoir was shattered.
The Hunter District Water Board saw it as its responsibility to convene a task force and write a report on why it happened. Its task force of board employees and private consultants concluded that although coal seam gas and sewer gas were present, it was probably town gas, which is supplied by the gas companies, that caused the explosion. Minister for Natural Resources, Janice Crozier.
I haven't pointed the finger at new gas. I just said it is highly probable. Our investigations and our report, and I compliment the Hunter Board and their staff on that, it's a very painstaking and a very thorough investigation that was done. We have eliminated what we thought could have been other causes.
The report says that gas in a stormwater drain, which normally would have escaped through a grate, was confined by debris and as a result found its way to the underground reservoir. The water level was low because it was peak consumption time. Subsequently, a large amount of gas accumulated, and that, according to the report, was why the explosion was so devastating.
We haven't had time to study it in detail yet. There does appear to be a couple of inconsistencies in it, to our way of thinking. But also we do note that the report states that their scientific tests have not proved conclusively that Towns gas was the cause of the explosion.
So you're not willing to claim any responsibility for the explosion?
Now at this stage we're waiting for the official report from Mr. Hills to come out, and we don't believe it's in the best public interest to preempt any of the facts or the findings that Mr. Hills is sure to release in the near future.
A spokesman for the Minister for Industrial Relations, Pat Hills, says the Minister is conferring with his legal advisors before announcing his decision on the findings on the Department's official report on the explosion. He says that should be ready by the end of the week.
My area of responsibility, we have
the
an
Minister's
obligation, not only
allocation
the
to
people in
develop
this Hunter
heritage
region, the
walks
Newcastle
will
area, but
centre
to
on
people
5
all over
important historic
the
areas
city.
in the Hunter. One is for a walk around Inner Newcastle, which received an allocation of $6,000. It will take in sites such as the Newcastle East Public School, Christchurch Cathedral, the Post Office, Tyrrell's House, and more than 70 other important historic places. A heritage walk has been operating in East Maitland, and under the package it will be fitted with new signposting. The other areas in the package are Raymond Terrace, Singleton and Morpeth. The walks will be developed and signposted by the Lands Department in cooperation with the local councils presiding over the area involved. When the walks are complete, the Lands Department will release a book outlining them and explaining the significance of each stop. According to Janice Crozier, the heritage walks already installed around the state have been a great success.
Because we've found, through the Lands Department, that providing people with other forms of recreation, and they're very, very successful, not only in demonstrating very clearly how you can go through and be part physically involved in a walk like this, but also preserving some of our heritage.
The increase in community concern about the Bowmore collection comes after a number of charity open days, and many people for the first time have seen Bill Bowmore's treasures. Now valued at some $15 million, it's been hailed as the best private collection in Australia. Director of the Newcastle Region Art Gallery, David Bradshaw, says the administration is keen to keep the collection in the city, but he says it simply doesn't have the money to buy
Well, the council, if in fact the council were to receive the Bowmore collection, they would be prepared to build a wing on the gallery, specially designed with the collection in mind to house it probably in the best possible way, under the best possible conditions, which of course everyone would like to see. I think the Bowmore collection being kept in Newcastle. The council, I think, is not in the position at the moment to buy the collection, which is, as you know, every year it becomes very, very expensive, as it's an extraordinarily important and valuable collection, and many millions of dollars are involved.
So it's just a matter of either somebody else buying it or Mr. Bowmore handing it over to the council?
Well, you know, I'd love it if it was the latter, but I mean, it's of such value that someone would have to be amazingly philanthropic, I would think, to do that. But still, on the other hand, I think it would be amazing for Newcastle to feel that in another 100 years they'd still have the Bowmore collection.
The Civic Association last night held a public meeting at the City Hall to discuss proposed amendments to the Environment Planning Act that the late Paul Lander introduced in 1979. The government proposes to change the Act in three major ways. Firstly, it will require the council to notify residents if it contemplates rezoning. Secondly, it will give the resident the right to ask for an independent person to come in and listen to any grievance on a rezoning matter. And finally, it will entitle the residents to take the matter to the Land and Environment Court if they object to the rezoning. The Minister for Planning and Environment, Bob Carr, believes the changes will give residents more rights than in the past.
We live in a time of residents' rights, and residents want to be heard, and the government wants to see that residents are heard.
But the Civic Association doesn't see it that way. They believe the amendments will make the Act too legalistic. They say few residents will take the matters to court in fear that they may lose and then incur the often hefty legal expenses. According to the group's spokesperson, John McCarthy, the residents and Newcastle as a whole will be the losers in the end.
Well, it means that now that people can apply for any form of development in any area, so that we can look forward to people looking towards providing businesses in residential areas, an extension of flat zones in residential areas. It's going to make for much more uncertainty for people in residential areas where before they did have some degree of certainty. And really it means that every development application is going to have to be looked at by every resident to ensure that they aren't going to be affected, which means that there's going to be a lot less certainty in the community as to the maintenance of lifestyle.
Wandering around Bill Bowmore's treasures, it's easy to understand why he wants to keep them with him. They are truly inspiring. He now oversees doors every weekend for different charities, and the proceeds also help him pay for the huge security costs. As a result of these openings, there has been public outcry about the collection's future, but it seems no one has bothered to ask Bill what he wants to do.
In the first place, I have never said that the collection is for sale. It's here, people are enjoying looking at it, and now that it opens up for public viewing every Sunday and every Monday of the year, it's giving a great benefit to the people who come to see it. And I can understand their enthusiasm because they pass wonderful compliments as they're going out, and I quite understand why they would be writing to the various institutions like premiers and town clerks, but they shouldn't make a scapegoat of them because they're not buying it. They don't have to buy this collection, despite I do believe that there has to be some time when something has to be done with it, because I can't be like the pharaohs of Egypt and have it buried with me, but I haven't thought of dying at this stage, and if there's anything to give away, well, I'm not ready to die.
The Minister is disappointed but not surprised by the cancellation. As long ago as April, the company had been warned that the Whaler project from Australian design and built armoured personnel carriers similar to this was under review. That was because escalating technology and the devaluation of the dollar had doubled the real cost of the project. Now Defence Minister Beazley has decided to upgrade the Army's present APCs, the M113s, instead. Gninins invested $200,000 and 4 years of research into the initial phase of the project, learning a great deal about defence technology along the way. Undaunted by the cancellation, the company is aggressively seeking other defence work and no jobs are at risk.
We certainly wouldn't expect that to happen. The people who've been working on the Project Whaler contract have been deployed largely to other areas, and we anticipate there'll be no staff cuts because of the announcement of the deferral of Whaler.
4 years and a lot of investment has gone into the Whaler project. What can Gninins get out of its investment?
Well, there are a number of defence projects around in which Gninins are interested. We have, of course, developed a great deal of technology because of our participation in Project Whaler, and we are now better placed to participate in other defence contracts than we were previously. Two examples may well be if there is a refurbishment program for the M113 armoured personnel carriers which are currently in service with the Army, then we would be certainly willing and well qualified to tender for that work. And we are examining ways in which we can work with the submarine contractors in bringing some of the submarine work into the Newcastle area.
Mr Howard's visit to Newcastle yesterday centred on a series of discussions and talks on the issue of tax reform with local business and commercial bodies. It's part of a concerted campaign by the Liberals to have senior party officials regularly visiting the area. A confident John Howard explained the reason for this new tactic.
The federal seat of Hunter went within 2% of falling to the Liberal Party at the last election. We'll win Hunter at the next federal election, so we're not banging our heads against the brick wall, and my visit is part of a steady pattern of establishing a much stronger Liberal presence in this part of the world between elections, and not just a case of turning up a few days before the election campaign and expecting people to love you.
It was a timely visit for Mr Howard yesterday, with the news that the Consumer Price Index for the June quarter had risen by the largest amount in more than 2.5 years. Mr Howard warned more than 200 people who attended a Newcastle Businessmen's Club luncheon that it's bad economic news if a wage rise is allowed to follow.
It is bad economic news unless the government successfully argues before the Arbitration Commission for a full discounting in future wage adjustments of the price effects of that devaluation. Then we run the risk of locking ourselves into a new depreciation inflationary spiral.
Mr Howard then turned his attention to tax reform. He stated that the present tax system relies too heavily on direct personal income tax. He claimed that elaborate tax avoidance schemes were as good as dead, and cited the cash economy as the largest area of tax avoidance. Mr Howard criticised the proposed capital gains tax and tax on fringe benefits. He favours a broad-based indirect tax and says tax reform should be biased to advantage families with young children. But the Shadow Treasurer warned that a totally
examine the issue of taxation objectively,
would never be achieved.
You have to recognise there is nothing quite so difficult to change in Australia as the taxation system. And you will never achieve a change in the Australian taxation system that everybody likes. You will never achieve a change in the Australian taxation system that doesn't involve some people losing and some people gaining. And the idea that we can ever have in Australia a totally uncomplicated, simple taxation regime that everybody loves and everybody respects is a pipe dream.
Since 1981, the University of Newcastle's Department of Community Programs has sponsored meetings.
And I thought that it would be important, in addition, the media have a role in increasing the visibility of resident issues that are important to them, and this really denotes a specific geographical location.
On the program were sessions on community
there emerge structures of organised, emerges greater control and involvement of the solve problems, and so on is another aspect. There are a whole series of definitions.
In the Hunter, according to Singleton Shire social planner Ray Rorschach, the program is beginning to pay dividends, with more and more community development occurring to meet the needs of residents, as well as local and state government bodies.
And is it because most councils have established community advisory committees, and that gives community representatives a chance to meet face to face with the elected officials.
And is this designed to take the workload away from councils or government?
It's actually hopefully to take some of the financing of services away from local government and making self-help and fundraising at the local level more practical.
In local rugby league, Lakes United moved into second place on the NBN Carlton first grade ladder with a win over Wooden Spooners North Newcastle yesterday. North got away to a 10-0 lead early in the game, but got pegged back by Lakes, who went to the break ahead 14-13. Lakes stormed away in the second half to win 34-13 and finished with 7 tries for the match. In the other game yesterday, Macquarie United defeated Maitland 20 points to 12. In the Australian rules match of the day, last year's premiers Warners Bay scored a 30-point victory over Williamtown. Warners Bay slotted 19 goals 9, 123 for Williamtown's 14 goals 7, 91. In basketball, the Newcastle Kern Falcons continued their tumble down the National Basketball League ladder on Saturday night. The Falcons were outclassed by the Adelaide 36ers, who took out the game 139 to 120. The Falcons were in trouble right from the word go, and the loss put them on the borderline for the playoff positions. Adelaide, on the other hand, looked every bit finalist material. In rugby union, the touring Fijian side handed out a thrashing to the New South Wales countryside at Singleton on Saturday. The Fijians scored 5 tries to 1 to win by 36 points to 12. The score was a fair indication of the two sides. Fiji were too big, too strong and too classy, while the countryside just couldn't seem to stop the Fijian attacks and couldn't penetrate their defence. And in the annual pub-to-pub fun run at Port Stephens, it was a case of Lightfoot by name, Lightfoot by nature, with Newcastle runner David Lightfoot coming within a half a minute of breaking the record for the 9-kilometre course. Lightfoot covered the distance from the Salamander Bay Hotel to the Seabreeze Hotel in Nelson Bay in 28 minutes and 6 seconds. The first woman home was Louise Nelson from Dundalk in a time of 34 minutes 20 seconds.
It was a plane coming down, and
Quit for Life is an operation of the State Health Department and has been in the Hunter since April 1984. Its Newcastle office is manned by 4 staff employed through a Commonwealth Employment Program. Their job is to take the Quit for Life message to the community and to represent the National Heart Foundation and the Cancer Council.
People calling in for information and advice.
Has received government funds of $57,000 for 32 weeks, and according to campaign coordinator Terry Slevin, the government's Stop Smoking program will be seen everywhere.
The project, taking the anti-smoking message to the community essentially, things such as Matara, Community Safety Week run by the National Safety Council, we've got things such as Education Week. We're also looking at promotional activities such as a beach concert possibly in summer, and we're also looking for other opportunities to get out to talk to people about issues involved in smoking.
The Health Department launched a series of TV commercials in Sydney last night designed to shock young people out of starting the habit. But the Federation of Australian Television Stations knocked it back because it was considered unsuitable for children's viewing. Quit for Life are appealing against the decision and hope the TV Federation will change its mind.
Mask.
Dad?
The competition started in the Hunter region in 1972, and since then we've lost only 2 state finals to a Sydney side.
It's the only CHS competition to allow private and Catholic schools to compete. Today's Open Age Regional Final is a real battle between Cardiff High and Raymond Terrace High. In the third quarter, it was 45 points each, despite the brilliant kicking of Dale Withers, who kicked 6 of Raymond Terrace's 7 goals. The final score, Cardiff 8-15-63, defeated Raymond Terrace 75-47. Cardiff won today with an all-round team effort, with their best players being Patrick Cooksley and Wayne Gordon. In an earlier match, the final of the under-15s, Cardiff 9-11-65 defeated Katara 4-6-30.
The Westpac rescue helicopter arrived at Fletcher Park Psychiatric Hospital shortly after 9 o'clock last night with a critically injured man on board. He suffered severe head and chest injuries in the accident on Gandown Road, Canna Bay. Ambulance paramedics worked on the man on the helicopter run to Newcastle, but their efforts were in vain and he passed away at the hospital a short time after arrival. The dead men were passengers in a car which skidded off the road and then collided head-on with another vehicle. The drivers of both cars escaped with minor injuries.